Welcome to everyone to this webinar on social enterprise partnerships. That's in English, as we have English presenters and we have also English-speaking audience with us. My name is Per Bach. I'm from Sociale Entrepreneurs in Denmark, a national organization that works to promote social entrepreneurship and social enterprises with different kinds of efforts. And I'm together with Anne.
Yeah, I'll join you.
Into the picture from the professional who from a project called Rummelig Genstart, who is a project supported by the European Social Fund and the Danish Board of Business Development. A project that tries to that works to build an inclusive labor market and do so create jobs. This includes working with social enterprises and supporting social enterprises. At this webinar, we will focus on corporates in the UK working together with corporates. And we have two, I think, of the most inspiring cases, namely Gloucestershire Gateway Trust and the Wild Hearts Group. And we will also hear about, I think, one of the most successful campaigns in the world in terms of working or in terms of motivating corporates and multinationals to buy from social enterprises, namely the Social Enterprise UK campaign by Social Corporate Challenge. We have a tight schedule, so we will try to finish on time, 16:15 in Denmark, 15:15 in the UK, and 17:15 Eastern European Standard Time, as we have people from Latvia joining us also here. All presenters will leave a little time after their presentation for questions, so you can ask questions there. And if we stay on time, there will also be a little period for questions and discussions in the end of the webinar. So the webinar is recorded as we have a lot of people who couldn't be with us today, so they can have access to the webinar afterwards. But without further ado, I will leave the floor to our first presenter, namely Mark Gale from the Gloucestershire Gateway Trust. So Mark, the floor is yours. Maybe you can try the screen sharing again.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's really amazing to join everybody. As Pier's already found out, I'm a technological idiot. So I'm just trying to get up on the screen my presentation. I think here it comes. Can you see that? Yes?
Yes, it works fine.
Okay, fantastic. So, my name's Mark Gale. I'm the Chief Executive of Gloucestershire Gateway Trust. It's really amazing to join you, and we're really keen to share and learn with yourselves. But I do have to apologise because I'm in the middle of some job interviews for people. So I've just stepped out of those to do this presentation, and then I have to go back. So I probably will go by 2:45 at the latest. So I will try and stay and listen to some of the other speakers, but I will have to drift on. So just to set the background for this, really, I've worked for the last 40 years now in communities that are predominantly social housing communities. So with a single social landlord, and particularly around trying to blend things like community business, community organising and community services into single organisations that are resident-led and obviously generate the benefit that local people want. So the context on this, as you can see from this slide, where we are. And actually, if can you see my pointer on there as well on the screen? I can't. I don't know if you can see that, but basically the area we're talking about is Matson, which is on the right, and then there's a ring of social housing estates that go around this hill, and the yellow bit and the gap between the red bit is a big hill called Robbinswood Hill, which is an outcrop on the edge of the Cotswolds, next to Gloucester and between the Forest of Dean, which some of you may or may not know. But what it illustrates historically, a lot of that social housing got pushed to the side of the city because people didn't want it in the city centre, relatively poor communities, and it was a way of geographically marginalising them. But what we did have at the time was this, at the bottom of that image, you'll see there's a blue line, and that is the M5 motorway in Gloucester. You know, in the 80s and 90s, when I worked in a lot of these communities and with community organisations in these areas, the motorway was always seen as a big problem. All that happened really was that we got pollution from it. We got congestion when there was an accident on the motorway. So we found, looking at data, that each death or serious injury costs public services £1 million to clear it up, to get people into treatment, to support them in rehabilitation, and to pay benefits and things like that for the periods that people were out of work, or families that needed support when there was a fatality. So the motorway for those communities, although it was only literally 800 or 1,000 metres away from the edge of those estates, contributed nothing. And actually, people would come into one end of the county of Gloucestershire and then go all the way past these communities and the hill and go out the other end, either head into Bristol in one direction and the southwest, or head into Birmingham and the northwest, Manchester, Liverpool, in the other direction. And they often wouldn't know they were going through Gloucestershire, and they wouldn't know anything about Gloucestershire, and they wouldn't gain anything from that. So what made us think differently about this, and I think it's one of our first learnings in the process, was that in the 90s, an organisation called Oxfam, which is an international aid charity, invited us to link up with some Indian communities, which were the Adivasi people in the Nilgiris Hills in India, who'd been made landless by deforestation. And they were growing tea to reclaim their land, and eventually had set up a tea factory and were using that tea production and reclaiming the land for tea growing as part of their sort of income development and employment. We spent some time together, the two communities, connecting and discussing things. And eventually somebody who was working in that team in the Nilgiris Hills came to Gloucester, where we are, spent 3 months with us and did a little impact assessment as an external person about what we were doing. And we found two things, I think. One was that we were working on all the same issues: education, enterprise, employment. And secondly, the guy who came and spent time with us, a guy called Svante Takara, said to us, you need to start thinking about things that you see as a problem and try and turn them into assets for your communities. So don't think of them as deficits, think of them as assets, and think about how you can use them in different ways. And that's what made us think again about the motorway, about seeing whether we could change something that we always saw as a problem and really didn't have a lot to do with positively, or anything to do with positively, into something that we could utilise positively and which would drive change for us. At the same time, the residents groups that we were supporting and working alongside were saying, we're fed up of government programmes that come, stay with us for 3 years, then disappear. And we think those have been really interesting programmes, but how much of that have we got left as a legacy, and how long will that last? And I think what we took away from that was that what we actually needed most of all was the ability to create good quality long-term jobs, and also to generate an income that would be our income, the community's income, to distribute and support the community activities, services or campaigns that local people thought was important, and that came unfettered by ties to large organisations or government or lotteries or the EU or anywhere else. So that's what made us think about the motorway again, and we thought for a while about it and talked about it in the community, and we thought for a while that we might be able to use some of the land around the motorway perhaps as a festival site, because it's quite compact, well contained, and it would be a good way to generate income. But we also then engaged with the government at the time, who were reviewing their motorway service area policy, and we were trying to persuade them that actually there was a real role for social enterprise in the motorway services market, and that would be a much better way to get more diversity into the market, and it would be a much more acceptable way for people who perhaps are artisan producers, so not sort of big sort of Coca-Cola scale producers, but small local farms, for them to get produce to market and also to get profile for it. So we realised there were 28 million vehicles carrying 40 million people a year past the back of our estate, and that this actually was, when we thought about it, it was a platform that nobody else had of that scale, that we could really use to both generate the things like jobs and income that we wanted for our communities, but also a way in which we could get local artisan producers to get their produce to market and also give it profile, so that market wouldn't just stop at our site. It would be a market that they could then roll on to other places. So we took the land. So we talked to the local farmers who own the land either side of the motorway services. We literally had no money at that time, so occasionally I didn't get paid, but that wasn't the worst thing in the world. But we took the land on some land options, and then we went to find a business partner that we believed we could work with and would hold the same sort of values and purpose as us. So we looked around the motorway network in the UK, and I always used to say to people that if I put a blindfold on someone and took them to a motorway services anywhere on the UK network and then took that blindfold off, would they know where they were? Would they be able to tell by the food or what they could see, or what they were told by colleagues who worked there? And the answer was no, they wouldn't, because everyone looked the same. Everyone had multinationals in it. In fact, when we looked around, there was only one small motorway service station in the whole country that was an independent at the time, and that was in the Lake District, a place called T-Bay. And it was one that had been set up by a local farming family 40 years ago when the M6 was built. And so we went to see them and we had a chat about it. And in the end, after 2 or 3 years, we formed a partnership to bring the project forward. And so that's a partnership in which both ourselves and the business, which is called Westmoreland, have a stake in. So we're both shareholders in the business, and one which we defined our social and environmental objectives in our shareholders agreement, with penalties if they weren't delivered for the business. And so by doing that, we set our foundation for our partnership between the business and our charity and the communities that we represented firmly for the long term. And I think the thing that I reflect on just at that point was that the reason that worked was because the business really wanted to expand at that point. So that family business were ready to try and grow what they were doing. And from our perspective, we had an asset. We had an asset which was really valuable, which was the site. So although we hadn't bought it, we had it on an option to buy. Nobody else could take that site from us, and actually sites were really valuable for people to get to. They were difficult for commercial operators to find. But so we had that in our ownership, and we were able to then negotiate a decent deal on the situation, which is what we did. So that was back in 2008, 2009. We took the project into planning. We got planning approval. Illustrative of the balance of power, I think, at that point was that once we got planning approval, two big multinationals, Road Chef and Moto, who own motorway services either side of where we were, sort of 20 miles either way on us, then dragged us through the courts, through the High Court, the Supreme Court, and every other court they could get us into, to try and overturn our planning approval. And they assumed, because we had no money, or almost no money, and our partner was a small family business, so significant in scale, with a few £1 million in turnover, but not like these Moto and Road Chef, who had hundreds of millions of pounds and dozens of motorway services up and down the country. So eventually we won that. We started to build the site in 2013. This is a picture of all the charities that have benefited with it and campaigned for the planning approval with us. Plus some people from the business as well, and the builders, starting the build in February 2013. This is later in the year when we started to build the first side, this is the first point really when we thought it was going to be real, because we'd put up the first shell of the building on one side. We stood on the roof. In our buildings, all of our roofs are green roofs, grass roofs, because a landscape impact's been really important to us through the process. And so it was a really exciting moment where we could see that it would come to fruition. But of course, with the best will in the world, it was still quite tricky to know how it would play out in terms of what the market could deliver for us. So this was our lesson, first of all, turn our deficits into assets. And I'm a big believer that most communities have assets that are unrecognised in communities, and that we should be trying to work harder to try and identify those. And our deal that makes it work for us is that we get between 2 and 3p in the pound from everything that's sold at the services, apart from petrol. So at the moment, we're until COVID, we were selling about £20 million of non-fuel produce at the two sites. So we were generating an income of nearly £500,000 a year that we were using to reinvest into our community groups in our areas. So in a very targeted way, we didn't spread it over a big patch. This was a project that came from the local communities, had been created by local residents, discussing what they would like. And so we've reinvested in those areas, and especially in those partners who stood with us all the way through the process. So some of those people who were putting the spade in the ground, groups like play organisations and time bank groups and other groups like that, who really had no more money than we did, but saw the benefit of creating long-term jobs and an income. And this is a map really of which illustrates both the areas, the hill, the motorway, and then you can see some of the organisations that we've been invested in. So we didn't take any income off the business until 3 years in, because we wanted to make sure that the business was robust enough to be able to afford to give the money to us. So from 2007, we opened the first site in 2014, opened the second side, went straight across and built the other side straight after. We've been getting an income since 2017. So we're just finishing a first 5-year programme. So we try and commit to community partners for a long period. And for all of those groups, we've just renewed a commitment for another 3 years. And each one of those gets £20,000 a year from us into their core funds, so that they can do what they need to do with it rather than what we want them to do with it. but they're all in a very tight geographical group. And these are some of the things that go on in terms of things that benefit our communities, but also what we found is that because we're, I never set out to be running a motorway service station. I'm just a community worker who's worked with residents to try and seize the moment and the opportunity. But actually what we found is we're mainly restricted by our imagination in this rather than by budgets. It's because we never have the opportunity to think about how we can use those assets in a different way. So we've had to think really carefully and imaginatively about how we get the business into play, not just in terms of employed jobs, and we now employ over 400 people there, but also in terms of income, and then also how we use the business. So we work with 130 local producers within 30 miles. So how can we connect with those producers? How can those producers help us train people or give people rural life experience? What can we do with food that's spare? So during the COVID period, what's been really fantastic is our producers, because our motorway service station was literally closed down for a period and we took massive hits on our income. But what we did have is lots of producers with lots of food, keen to help the local communities. So where we've been doing food distribution and such like, we've had really good local farmer supplies that have enabled us to give a good quality food to people. And we also have a community growing space on site. So some of this is about cultural stuff, because reputation has been really important for our communities. They've historically been seen to have a bad reputation. Some of this works around literacy. The top left-hand corner picture is about one of our bread producers who took a load of people from the community, spent a day with them, showing them what they could produce with bread other than sandwiches and rolls. And so using it for soups and other ways of cooking and using it into other products. And again, we're calling on each other's skills so that we can share for that. And then other bits are things like some of the older people's groups we support, through literacy work that we fund in terms of getting volunteers into places to listen to children read. And again, this is some more illustrative campaigns. And I think what's really helped us, what it's done is, because we have that stake in that business, we've now changed the view of a lot of public bodies that I'm an old fat grey bloke who's sort of just past 60, but actually this business came from local residents, stood on the council estate, talking about these things outside the shops, developing their thinking. And what the message is for us from this to everybody, particularly local people, is you don't have to be an old fat grey bloke to do a business. Actually, people who live on our social housing estates can create this business. They've got the imagination, they've got the ability, they've got skills. What they don't have often is the time and the investment. And if we can bring that to places and help that happen, then there's a real benefit for everybody. So I think the biggest thing for us has been to make sure before we go and negotiate with the business partner, we don't want to rely on their goodwill of corporate social responsibility. We want to negotiate from a position of strength where we've got an asset they want and they've got some skills and investment that we want, and we'll put those two things together and we'll make it happen. So we've got some other, just to finish, we've got another business like this that we're in the pipeline of just nurturing through, bearing in mind this one took us 20 years to bring to life, so it wasn't a short, wasn't a quick hit. But we've also got another really interesting proposition coming through around community sports and a quite a big capital investment in that as well. So it's been really exciting. I love the fact that we've got a large quantity of cakes on supply really easily, which doesn't do me any good in terms of well-being. But the key thing for us has been to have that asset so that we've got something to negotiate with. And I think finding those assets in every community is really valuable. It's not, you know, our idea is a simple idea, it's replicable. And just finally, we've got a colleague from America who comes and spends a month with us each year, who supports and trains local residents, and we do a community survey, so we hear what local residents want every year, and that sets our priorities for what we invest in some ways. And she was working with a group of people from an Indian reservation in Arizona, I think it was, and they were talking about what they could do with the highway that goes past where they live. And lo and behold, that concept, you know, is one that's now being nurtured there as well. So it's something that can be taken and utilised elsewhere. And I think often the best ideas are those. I've probably gone over my time, have I, Per? Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm happy to take questions if that helps, or colleagues I'm sure can deal with that later. Oh, and I'm also, you've got my contact details. I'm really happy for people to contact me directly after the event if there's a conversation that people want to pick up, or I can be helpful in any way.
That sounds. We can just maybe take one question if there's someone who has a question, or otherwise you are available, so people can just contact you directly on the contacts we will leave here, or they can contact me, and I'll make sure you get the questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mark, for taking the time. It's a really interesting project that can hopefully inspire you.
Thank you.
See you. Bye-bye. And then I will go to our next presenter. Do we have a Mick checks? Yeah, we have Mick with us. Thank you. From the Wild Hearts group, also a very inspiring project, I think, having a huge impact in the way you do business, and you're actually one of the few businesses that go into a traditional market, you can say, and utilize it to create the impact. So the floor is yours, Mark. Maybe you will share your screen with us.
I'm just going to actually have a chat with you, if that's okay, rather than using slides and video.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to meet you all, and thank you so much for inviting me. As Per was saying, I'm the founder and chief executive of the Wild Hearts Group. The Wild Hearts Group is described, and I'm delighted that Sociale Entrepreneurs UK are going to be joining us. Jennifer speaking after. The Wild Hearts is described by Sociale Entrepreneurs UK as the leading B2B social enterprise in the UK, and our corporate partners are increasingly describing us as one of the leading B2B social enterprises in the world. We're also B Corp, top 10% B Corp for community impact. We're in the 100 Meaningful Business, which is a list of business leaders who are using purpose and profit to address the global goals. And to date, we say on our website that we've transformed the lives of 1.5 million people, but it's actually getting closer to 2 million. We always really understate that. But before I tell you, how we get started, etc., maybe some little lessons that I can weave through the story. The one thing that we talk about a lot is values and why you do what you do. And the values on our wall that drives Wild Hearts are entrepreneurship, compassion, innovation, and excellence. And that was the background in which I came from. All those 4 values lead towards the empowerment. We say we're in the empowerment business. So how did it get started? I had been in business for a while. I had my own businesses. I'd never fitted into the corporate framework. So I'd been very fortunate in business, but it was all entrepreneurial startups that I built up from nothing. Before that, I was a professional musician in a rock band, riding about on a motorbike. Looked more like Per, and I learned more about business singing in a rock band than I did at business school. Where the inspiration, or rather the catalyst for Wild Hearts came, was actually when I went on a climbing expedition, a high altitude climbing expedition in Kashmir in Pakistan. The reason I tell you that is because I was trying to climb 2 8,000 meter peaks, which was ridiculously stupid. I always say men climb mountains because they can't give birth. They're always trying to prove something. And while I was on that expedition, what it did was it clarified who I was and what I stood for. And it stripped away the veneer of maybe the values that we feel we're meant to have from perhaps the media or superficial culture, and got right to the heart of who I actually was. Because on that expedition, which as it evolved, it was brutally dangerous. And there was a young French climber in the expedition just ahead of us who we found dead in his tent. And the reason I tell you that is because the Pakistani military scrambled a helicopter to take his corpse back to Paris and broken-hearted parents. It takes a week of walking over the ice to get to the base camp at K2. And so they sent a helicopter for this young boy. The reason I tell you that is because 6 or so weeks later, my guide and someone who'd effectively become almost like a bodyguard to me, someone who I'd become very close to, was a guy called Sher. And he was from Kashmir, and he was a tribesman who was one of our guides. And he collapsed, and it turned out that his lungs had collapsed. And I was told by the Bulgarian Minister for Health, who was on the Bulgarian expedition, was that if he wasn't down in 24 hours, he was going to die. And when I tried to call for a helicopter, I was told that nobody was coming. And the question is, what's the difference between a dead Westerner and a very live but desperately needy Kashmiri tribesman? Was one could afford it and the other one couldn't. Given the fact that no one else would help, I lost my temper and got him out myself. I got a couple of the other porters and we sent them ahead and we did this kind of relay, and I half carried, half dragged him out. And it took me 4 days and it was hellish, but he got out and he's alive to this day, I'm delighted to say. But the point being is, while I was on that glacier in minus 40 at night, shivering, trying to keep him alive and shivering myself, and all I could think about was the only reason we were having to go through this because a man was judged by his resources, his bank balance. And I swore to myself that if I got home, I would do whatever I could to use business to help people. So it was that, a promise made to myself on a glacial wasteland in Kashmir, but I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I know why I'm going to do it. I don't know what business I'm going to set up, but I'm going to use the resources I've got and my networks, etc. And I don't know how I'm going to help people, but I won't stop until I've done it. And that's where Wild Hearts was born. Okay, so the reason I say that is because where that impetus led to was a question: how do I use my entrepreneurial abilities and the entrepreneurial environment that I'm in, and how can I harvest wealth from corporates without having to ask for donations or rely on state aid? Those were my questions I asked myself, demanded of myself. And the reason I tell that, and we do a lot of work in schools through our schools program, is if you have a big enough why, the how will present itself. And the business that's impetus led me to was to launch an office supplies company. So when I was writing about my motorbike, trying to be a rock star, my dream was not to sell envelopes and paper clips. No disrespect to selling envelopes and paper, but it wasn't like, when I grow up, this is what I'm going to do. But what I needed was a no-brainer purchase that corporates could buy from. And so when I was sitting in somebody's office and I looked around and she had all this office supplies all around her office. And I said, how much do you spend on all this rubbish? And she said, I don't know. Made a phone call, we spent £250,000. Who'd you buy it from? I don't know. Who do we buy from? So-and-so, so-and-so. Do you care? No. Why would I? And I said, if I could get you that stuff, but I used the profits to, and I don't know what, but did something good with it, would you buy from me? She went, of course, mate, why wouldn't I? That was the idea, right? Now, here's the point. I funded the business, I set it up and I drove it, and we'd never sold office supplies before, but just before the lockdown, we grew at 24%, 38%, and then 52%. We won as many new customers, corporate customers, through the lockdown than we did before. And my sales guys, who we have a very small, very, very passionately dedicated team, they've said that since last September, we haven't lost a single pitch that we've gone for. And that's in a flat market. So it's not what we sell, it's why we sell it. Now, following this logic, and we have a training program which corporates use to train their people and the stuff and the values that Wild Hearts exhibit, is we always say, like, well, why do you do what you do? Because when it came to who we were going to help, you follow your value chain. So we're driven by entrepreneurship and we're driven by compassion. Entrepreneurship and compassion, entrepreneurship and compassion. How does that manifest? I tried to work with some big, famous household charity names, and I was horrified at the apathy, the lethargy, the complacency. I was really horrified. And I knew that if I put my money in there, it would just evaporate. Now, there's some great charities, but the big ones I spoke to, I was really quite horrified how the message did not fit the reality. And then I was introduced to Professor Mohammed Yunus and the concept of microbanking. You know, I don't like, and my team don't like the term microfinance because it's too much of a catch-all. Payday lenders who are exploiting the poor with disgraceful interest rates, preying on the vulnerable, that's microlending. And then there's institutions that are in the deepest rural areas of countries like Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, such as Wild Hearts, empowering local women in their communities to transform the economic prospects of their environment. And that's what Wild Hearts does. But when I was thought, well, that's entrepreneurship, right? So it's entrepreneurial compassion. You help the person get started in business. She becomes a role model in her own community, and the money's recycled, and you get a little economic miracle in the village. And so it was an absolute obvious place for us to evolve to. We started funding some good microfinance partners, and then recently, well, I'll say recently, a couple of years ago, we actually became the owners, our foundation became the owners of very significant rural banks in Zambia, Malawi, etc. So we now own them, or our foundation owns these social enterprises dedicated to empowering the poor. Why do we focus on women? 75% of the world's population of women are excluded from finance. No one taught me that. I had to research it. 75%. It is like a financial apartheid. And the implications for these women through the second-class status that engenders is that they are the recipients of more violence. They get the medicine last, they get the food last, they're at the back of the queue for everything, to such an extent that there's more women missing right now than all the men killed in all the wars of the 20th century. And yet it seems to be a secret. Where's the protests? No museums. Nobody talks about it. And here's the point. You take a woman in rural Zambia who is illiterate, at the back of the queue, didn't go to school, but if her brothers did, she probably still didn't, has no formal ID, no security, and no way of guaranteeing her ability to pay back a loan. Our portfolio at risk is less than 0.5%, which is virtually unheard of in banking. And if you empower that woman, statistically showing she is the most reliable person in the banking world to lend to. Her children, she addresses nutrition. Her children will be taller and heavier than the other children that didn't get access to the banking, her mother. The children will go to school. She'll insist her daughters can go to school, and then she will become the agent in her own life, go back to school, learn how to read, become numerate, start voting, and start being an agent of change in her own community. And she's not a recipient of charity. She's a micro-entrepreneur. And then she inspires the next group of women, the next group, and so it goes on. And so that was the obvious place for us to function. Following on then from, I know Per wants me to talk on the idea of corporate partners. One thing that Wild Hearts has been blessed by is these incredible corporate ambassadors who just bought into what we believed in. And I think they knew that we were so sincere and so authentic and so business-like in the way that we do things that they wanted to help. You know, for anyone listening that wants to work with corporates, if they, as we say, lift the bonnet and look and go, this is true. And then they check your numbers and your compliance, go, this is real. And they believe in your mission, they will move heaven and earth to help you. And there's too much talk in the media about big this and this brand and that brand. We forget they're populated by human beings. They go to bed at night worrying about their kids just as we do, or the environment, or their communities. And if you give them a credible, efficient way to take action, they will. It's our job to communicate and make it easy for them. Don't say, well, you need to change all your office premises. That's quite a big ask. Would you buy your pens? So that was the first one. From there, we went from stationery to office supplies to furniture to janitorial to uniforms, every product they could buy. And then we moved into document storage And then we moved into training, which we'll touch on later on. Next thing about the help that can be given to you in terms of mentorship. The next thing that World Hearts does is we set up female-owned workers' co-ops in places like South Africa to manufacture reusable sanitary pads, which are then distributed through our business networks to the most vulnerable girls to keep them in school. And why do we do that? When I talked about following your values, we're in the empowerment business. We don't set the businesses up for the women. We help empower them to set up their own. We empower them to take action in their own lives. Well, when I reached out to Johnson & Johnson, one of my mentors in Johnson & Johnson, an amazing guy, I said, look, we're aggregating these women who, if they don't want you to find them, you'll never find them. They come out of their rural environments to meet each week for business training, to receive the loans, pay the loans back, etc. What else can we do to empower these women? And his answer, he went through, there's trauma, there's malaria, he went through all the scourges that these poor people face. And then he came back and said, keep your laser focus on education, Mick, and keep your laser focus on girls in these communities and provide them with reusable sanitary pads. I never knew such a thing existed. And why do we do that? Because we empower the girls to stay in school. Because in South Africa, for example, 1/3 of all girls drop out of school because they can't manage their period. I'm saying that in the 21st century. Since there's ever been humans, there's been periods. And yet, we still have girls dropping out of school. Now people go, well, that's a bit obscure, Mick. Why do you care about that? Well, we're driven by empowerment and we're driven by justice. So if when a girl drops out of school in an environment like that, what happens to her? She's more likely to be trafficked. She's 3 times more likely to contract HIV. She's more likely to be a child bride. Her children will have half the chance of surviving past 5. And very interestingly, an educated woman will have an average of 2 kids. An uneducated girl will have an average of 8. So it's even been discussed from an environmental point of view. If you want to reduce the population, it's what you educate girls. Never mind the moral case. And the United Nations have said that the closest thing we have to a silver bullet for addressing the scourges that faces the most poorest communities in these countries is ensure that we educate girls. And so that's why Wild Hearts empowers girls to stay in school. All this then comes together with our education program. When you translate your mission to your own environment, you go, well, what people have said to me, Mick, you're going to launch a bank in the UK. I'm like, why would I do that? We're well served from community credit unions doing amazing work in the areas where they work, right the way through to large corporate banks. There's no place where Wild Hearts, I think, a need that we need to address there. But what I became obsessed with was the decline in social mobility. I'm a product of social mobility. I'm from a poor working class background in Glasgow. The decline in social mobility and the injustice of how a child's prospects were dictated by what postcode or zip code or whatever you call it they were born in. And the other thing was, with so many executives that we work with who really shared their passion for business for good, how could we train them to become the responsible business leaders of the future? And that's where our third company, Wild Hearts Talent, comes from. So we train the executives, all the graduates, apprentices, executives in companies like Zurich, Barclays, Nestle, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, I could go on. And we teach them about purpose-driven, values-driven entrepreneurial behavior. And the excellent point that Mark was making, we've had companies literally unleashing the most incredible projects and by harnessing the resources in a different way and becoming a different kind of business leader. I'll give an example. Zurich went through our program, and from we taught their procurement teams globally how to tap into this idea of their values. What came out of that was the Zurich Supplier Code of Conduct, that literally, if companies did not fulfill the stuff that we are passionate about and talking about today, they would reserve the right to disengage with them. And I know of one company at Wild Hearts has been trying to win as a customer for over 10 years who just didn't care. They've just lost a multi-million-pound contract with Zurich because, lo and behold, this stuff will catch up with you. So this stuff is get real teeth. How do we liberate people who are working in large corporates to begin to live their values? And our passion is to associate business excellence and top business performance and positive social impact as being one and the same. They're not mutually exclusive. As I come to an end, the things which really exciting, what I'm looking forward to hearing from Jennifer is the global goals, the announcement of the global goals, gave everybody a common language to talk about and give the people a focus that they could, it was like a language we could communicate in, and all different businesses were already doing it in certain ways. But not only is it giving them something, a way to talk about what they're doing, Wild Hearts, by being a Wild Hearts customer, you address over 50% of the global goals just by being one of our customers, or you contribute to it. So that gave us this way to talk about it. It's given a demand on the companies that were lagging a bit behind. And now the growth of ESG, environmental social governance, is such that 10 years ago we were saying companies who don't get this will cease to be commercially relevant in the future. And people, the right people going, yeah, we hear you, Mick, and we've already got our own programs. The noise in that, and I think the pandemic put it into overdrive about people can no longer extract from society and see themselves as not being a part of it. The focus, the genuine desire to be a part of the stuff that we're talking about and looking for graceful ways to interact with it is now overwhelmingly compelling. And that Wild Hearts is reaping the benefits as a result of that. And in the UK, we have the absolute wonderful advantage of being members of Social Enterprise UK. Our sales director sits on the board of it. And the Social Enterprise, the Social Enterprise UK by Social Corporate Challenge was like a sales dream, because every company that signed up for it was looking for a company like Wild Hearts. There's no accent, the vast majority of them are our customers. And so more and more companies are wanting to sign up, and it's becoming a normal thing to do. And it's very, very exciting. But when we want to transact with corporates, you can't ask them for a pity purchase. You can't say what they should do. The world is not run by what should be done. God knows, we've seen plenty of examples of that. And you can't trade on the, but we help people. That's a bit past, to say the least. You have to comport yourself with business excellence to address real business needs and help them report credibly to a corporate standard on the impact they are producing because they buy from you as a social enterprise. And I think, so therefore, as the bar has gone up for corporates, the bar has gone up for social enterprises, and I'm delighted with that, because there was too many who were trading on the, well, we don't really make any money and we're not really very good at telling you what we do, but could you buy from us because we're trying to do the right thing? That's not enough. It never was. And too many people could hide behind that quite cynically, and I've seen that. So it's a wonderful time to be involved in this movement, because more and more people are wanting to engage with it, and there's some incredibly talented people who are now focusing their attention, and there's some amazing organisations at SC UK that I think are setting a wonderful example globally as being a real catalyst for change in their own business communities. So that's Wild Hearts. Hope that was helpful, and I'll hand it back to you, Per.
Thank you very much, Mick, and thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. I'm really grateful that you are doing that. So I guess that also, if there's questions for you, I will collect them and send them to you, and we'll see if there's maybe a little time afterwards. But otherwise, I think I'll go directly to Jennifer from Social Enterprise UK, who will take us into the fantastic campaign that you do to motivate corporates and multinationals to buy from social enterprises, namely the Buy Social Corporate Challenge.
I know it's a mouthful, isn't it?
That get it right. The floor is yours, Jennifer.
Indeed. Now, can you share my presentation, if people don't mind, that I just put together a few slides, and Teams really doesn't like me, so every time I try to upload presentations on Teams, it just ends in tears. So is that okay, Per? Because
it's perfectly okay. I think
great,
should be there.
Fabulous. Great. I can see it, so hopefully that means everyone else can see it. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mick. Fabulous as always, and one of our stars on the Buy Social Corporate Challenge. So I just want to take you through a bit about building markets with the corporate clients. And I think with Mick setting the scene and sort of giving a bit of insight as to what their experience and how they've nurtured those relationships and so forth is a great startup point here. So just to take you through, for those that don't know about us at Social Enterprise UK, so next slide, sorry, I'm going to be one of those annoying, next slide please. We are, as it says on the tin, the national body for social enterprise. We have over 3,000 members now, and our work focuses around areas such as research, painting that picture of the social enterprise landscape, running campaigns and building awareness of social enterprise, leading policy to create an legislative environment that is positive for the social enterprise sector, and building those networks, local, regional, and national as well. The other big area for us, obviously, is helping social enterprises build markets. Sorry, next slide. So before I go into the corporate challenge, I think it's important to kind of set out the scene of how the corporate challenge, why it developed. Firstly, back in, probably about 8 years ago, we were starting to see a shift of an increasing number of B2B social enterprises coming into fruition. At the same time, we were having corporate clients with an increasing interest in the sector. And the sector, in terms of wanting to support the sector, they were quite vague in terms of how they did that. And, they just they knew social enterprise, they could see it was good, but they weren't quite sure what to do with it. And immediately there was something that we thought, actually, this could be a perfect formula here. It's our flagship program, the Bi-Social Corporate Challenge, and I gotta say, it's when we created that name, as I said, it is a mouthful there, but it's an initiative. It's quite simple in its premises. It really is about having a group of high-profile businesses with it coming together. So the collaboration point is incredibly important, with the aim of spending £1 billion with the sector. And we've now put a date on it to put some, making sure we get them, that we don't want that 1 billion to go on and on by 2026. Next slide. And it was launched in 2016. So, we're going into our 6th year here. I think going on, as I was saying about that sort of perfect storm in a sense of having an increasing growth of B2B social enterprises and corporates interested in it. What I think is amazing about the corporate challenge and what resonates, it's aligning core business with the CSR. So to Mick's point of getting away from that, just do it because it's a nice thing to do. Actually, this is about, how can you integrate good, responsible, best practice into your business, and it's not something that can just be scratched away. And really, it's about unlocking the buying power of these organizations to embed the corporate, traditionally that corporate social responsibility into their core operations. It's important to say for us, what's bringing in that collaboration piece and bringing in different types of businesses are very important for us. So if you go to the next slide, so we started in 2016 with 7 businesses. We are now at 30. We've got our 30th corporate partner on board last few weeks confirmed. And, to see that growth has been within these past 5 years has been incredible. What was important about us in creating this was making sure that we had that breadth of different types of businesses on there. So having that representation from different sectors enables us to demonstrate that anyone can buy from social enterprises. None of that, we're unique because of X and Y and Z. No, this demonstrates by having this different, we have businesses, as you can see here, professional services, we have tech companies, we have retailers, we have telecom, we have built environment. So by demonstrating that all of these businesses are committed and are, putting social procurement on their agenda is a great signal here. And in terms of what is the social enterprise itself, the best way I would describe it, it's a support package for corporates to enable them to deliver social procurement into their businesses. And how does that take shape? It takes shapes in things that we would start the journey with businesses on conducting a diagnostic with them. And what that means is we look at their spend, we review their spend, identifying the social enterprises that they're currently buying from. We've never had a business that wasn't buying from a social enterprise. Were they aware of it? Not necessarily so. So this enables us to create that benchmark and for them understanding actually this is where you currently are. And then with that benchmark, we look at sort of what are the things that we can bring into your organization as not a quick win, but something that, so this is where Wild Hearts is absolutely brilliant, because on stationery, as Mick said, are people sort of, do they clutch onto their stationery and say, I need to buy it only for, no, it's something. And so with someone like Wild Hearts, when you say, actually, this is stationery with purpose, then that makes their ears prick up. And I think actually, so Wild Hearts is incredibly, for us, they're one of the first ones on that journey of getting businesses to, basically switch their spend. So, for them, they're going to be buying stationery anyways. But if they're buying stationery and it's a great, purpose-led business, then that's a win-win, isn't it? And that's what's amazing about the program. Once we have that benchmark, we work with them on setting targets as well, because it is important that they just don't go, yeah, sign up. Yeah, that's fine. We want them to we want to challenge them. That's why it's called challenge. We want to challenge them. We work with them, setting up targets. It's not, that collaboration piece, we wouldn't actually go out and announce this organization spent this amount, this organization did that amount, because that's counterintuitive for us, because if one feels that they're not going to be able to reach the marks of another one, that wouldn't be necessarily positive for us in terms of you could have people dropping out. So for us, we would never release any things on individual numbers. It is very much a collective report. Some decide to go out and say, we've set a target on X amount because that's what they want to do, and that's absolutely their decision. But we as a program would not do that approach. It's very much about collectively what the group is doing. But we will work with them on setting those targets, and many of those targets are kept. That they're not something that is done released outside as such. We look at tailored recommendations with them in terms of the ones that will hit the mark for them maybe now, and then the ones they should build into. Internal awareness, and I think Mick again hit this point, that is really, these big businesses, they're people. And people, connecting with people and making them understand what their business is doing and understanding what social enterprise is and the power of it, and their business is committed to that, is incredibly powerful. And helping them drive that internal awareness helps the actual growth of the procurement itself, but also gets that real enthusiasm on social enterprise and people, their own personal journey as well, of wanting to buy more from social enterprise, learn more of social enterprise. So raising that awareness. We also have events called Meet the Supplier events, where we focus on particular categories and bring together all the buyers. These are in that COVID landscape, that's been transitioning into a digital format has been incredibly helpful. We have up to 100 buyers on these Meet the Supplier events, and we even have some of our partners who are based in the US or dialing in. So again, that power of the digital, that's fabulous. And we also record them so that they can keep them and look at them and share them with colleagues. That peer-to-peer learning as well is very important, because we want them to talk to one another and learn from one another, and basically enable them to springboard the work that they're doing so they can get there faster. And also importantly, we report annually on the progress of the program itself. So that takes us to the next slide, looking at our 5 years of impact. So within these 5 years, we have that £1 billion target. We are a bit away from that, as you can see, but we're really proud of nearly 1.64.4 million pounds spent with social enterprises. And that's incredible. And we're confident we will be able to get to that £1 billion mark by 2026. In addition to that, the number of jobs it's helped social enterprises create, the number of social enterprises that are supporting. So we have 550 social enterprises working with our corporate partners. The profits reinvested, 15.1 million. These are all great numbers here. And, it just shows you by transitioning something as simple, as that day-to-day spend to social enterprises, the real impact that that's having. Next slide. And I just wanted, and this in terms of some of those key learnings, there's been a huge amount that we've learned from this, and we're always learning on this. But I think, there's a lot of opportunity here for social enterprises. Social procurement is a really powerful tool for corporates to engage with their stakeholders. It's helping them link, to actually have something tangible that they can link on their purpose and their aspirations. It's helping them engage with their employees and recruit talent in. And we know, getting talent is a challenge. So, with people seeing that actually their business is doing that means a lot to their people. And that demonstrates in the surveys that we have from the partners as well, the engagement from staff on this. Demonstrating social value wins them business as well. And I think it's important as social enterprises that you need to show how your business is delivering on this side. So yes, as Mick said, that whole thing about the business itself and what you deliver, your products and services, absolutely. But but also being able to articulate your social impact in a way that isn't jargony, but that makes sense to them and they can see actually this is bringing value in, is incredibly important. And one of the things that we also found from our social enterprise suppliers is that corporate contracts are helping social enterprises to win business and helping the social enterprises to diversify their offer. So what we've discovered is that by having, having those big names within your credentials, because we've been told one of the questions you get asked right away is, what's your product and services? Who do you work with? Now, if you're able to say we work with, Deloitte, then people, oh, great, Deloitte, know them, and there's a bit, and that's been proven for us to build on business itself. There's also opportunities for geographical expansions by working with these partners. We had Britain's Bravest Manufacturing. They were based in England. And we had one of the partners saying, actually, we've got quite a lot of business in Scotland. Would you ever look at going up to Scotland? And they took their operations up to Scotland because there was a business case for doing that. New products and services, Wild Hearts, fabulous. Mick has mentioned their document storage and the work that they're doing around there. And that's really about listening to your clients and what are those opportunities? What are they looking for that I could develop my products for, which there is a market there for. And enhanced services. So basically, this is all about listening to what those clients, what do they want from you, and what do they need, and could you deliver it? And we're certainly finding evidence from the suppliers that it's certainly happening. I think another important lesson here is understanding the route to the market. And what I mean by that is, there can be an assumption of, okay, well, I will speak to Barclays and Barclays will be buying my coffee. well, actually, Barclays doesn't buy coffee. It's their FM provider. And so understanding is your service, is it direct with the client? Is it with their tier 1 or even their tier 2? But working that out, where is that route to the market? That's an important one to look at and know when you're going out for the business. Also, contracting and onboarding processes within these big organizations, it can be complex, it can be long. And, the lead times there, it can be 12 to 18 months. I mean, I even know in Corporate Challenge here, we've had organizations we've been speaking to for 4 years before they even decide to join the challenge. I mean, that's a big lead time, and hopefully not, but it's about the persistence. If you know the opportunity is there, but be realistic on that, because I think you need to build a realistic pipeline there. So just because you make that contact, and I'm sure Mick will agree with me in terms of, you make that first introduction, it doesn't necessarily mean right away the sales come in. And also, Mick mentioned this. So Mick, thank you very much for all your setting up here. Is be competitive on the quality, price, and the customer service. We do say here, don't buy because it's a good thing to do. Yes, that's part of it, but buy because this is the right thing for your business. It's the quality you want, it's the price you want. Because if not, all that happens is they might buy for a little bit and then they stop buying. So, but that's understanding that being competitive is absolutely essential. And we do have to break some of those, we have to myth bust quite a bit here ourselves in terms of with these corporate, they'll think of social enterprises as charities. And there's a big assumption here about social enterprises. The more expensive, the quality's not as great. And actually, we know that's not the case. And in fact, we know that from our partners say this is not the case. The partners that from our surveys, they say 95% of the social enterprises, 95% of the partners say they are cost neutral. 95% of our partners say that they deliver higher quality compared with the other suppliers that they're working with. So this is powerful stuff here. And, in terms of, it's not, buy from a social enterprise and you'll have to compromise. Not at all. Not at all. So that's a bit of our key learnings there. And then the next slide is really focusing for us on, we've now gone to 30 partners, which is great, but what do we do next with it? How do we develop this and grow this? So one of the things that we found, and Per, if you just go to the next slide, is that many of the corporate structures themselves, their procurement is set up on either an EU, EMEA, or a global level. And they prefer to engage with social enterprises initiatives across multiple markets, and not just sorry, is it acting up? Don't worry, we don't need it. But they prefer to basically work with one initiative to go across multiple markets. And with that in mind, we had that feedback with a few of our corporate partners. We're currently conducting a pilot, which is the Bisocial Europe pilot, where we're putting resource in to design and develop a pilot that is helping them in terms of that wanting to go to many markets but one point, and using those the elements that we had from the corporate challenge to deliver to our corporate challenge partners. We're working in order to deliver this. We know we can't do this on our own. Absolutely not. The whole working together and collaboration is important here. So we're working with the Euclid Network and Social Enterprise World Forum, as well as many of the Euclid Network members, including Social Enterprise Denmark, in terms of getting that work, that pilot off the ground. And that is looking at things like developing a a database that they can go to and look at B2B suppliers from countries within the EU and Switzerland that they can share with colleagues. So the idea here is that they get their teams throughout Europe buying social. So I would say if you do have, if you are a B2B social enterprise and you would like to be included in that database, please do get in touch with me. This is very much a pilot stage, and we're learning as we go along. We're currently working with on a sort of very deep dive with Germany and Ireland. And we're learning from this as we go along, because we recognize, again, it's not delivering the corporate challenge as it is. It has to, has those nuances for the local markets outside of the UK. The other thing is that we're looking at is we want to reach more. We want a bigger pool of buyers to buy social. So with different sizes of businesses, different types of organization. So we're looking at developing a digital procurement tool that's going to enable more businesses to do social procurement. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of SEUK and the Biosocial Corporate Challenge. Any questions at all from anyone? Sorry, hopefully that wasn't too long, or...
No, it was fine. So is there any questions out there? It's very silent. But also I can refer to that people are very welcome, I think, to get in touch with you if there's stuff
Absolutely.
to be clarified. And
yeah,
what I find interesting is the pilot that you're running now, and we already from Denmark delivered a small handful, I think.
You have, thank you.
Corporate, so-called corporate ready, I think you call it.
I know it's a horrible term, isn't it? But it is. I think, again, on that, lessons that we learn is the worst thing is getting a social enterprise that's not right or not ready at the right stage of their journey into a big business, because that can, we need to make sure they're at the right stage in terms of delivering and so forth. And we can help get the organizations there. But yeah, that corporate ready, as we refer to it, it's about being able to deliver at scale, really.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that it's also you also look at it in terms of a thing that can be developed. So it's not, if you are not corporate ready as a social enterprise, you are not stranded somewhere out in the desert. You can still move in the right
absolutely yeah, but it's just understanding where you are and what we have to do to get you there.
Super fine. I just wanted to hear, is there anyone else out there, or Mick, do you have some final remarks maybe?
I want to thank Jennifer and Social Enterprise UK, because they really are very dear to us and they are fantastic champions. And I really want to thank you for reaching out, Per, because this is one of the things that we teach in our training, and it's called the microcycle method, is social capital. And Wild Heart's about to launch degrees and a master's program in what we do, and there's a lot of large corporates want us to train their people. And the way it has been brought about is simply by reaching out to people that we've got to know over the years and by coming together to make it happen. And so the connections and the role models and the mentors, just by having these conversations, the fact that you and I met and then, you reached out and, here we are. So it's remarkable what can come from these little sparks. And so I'm really grateful. I've never been to Denmark, so I'm delighted to virtually be there. And hopefully, something nice will come of this. So thanks for reaching out and making it happen.
Thank you very much. I thought if you might maybe end the webinar with a small story I have from you about the micro-tyco, the little guy who was very inventive with his £1. So Wild Hearts has this micro-tyco entrepreneur course for young people, where they get £1, and then the challenge is to make it grow. And I think you can tell the story better than me.
Well, that was the one that we started it with little kids, and then that evolved into, okay, you don't get a pound. It became a pound, a dollar, a euro, a rupee. It just went, but then we evolved that into you have to come up with an idea to address the global goals. And that's where Zurich's procurement charter came from, and all sorts of amazing things in brands like Barclays. But these kids are the ones that inspired everybody. And one thing I should say is over 50,000 kids a year go through all employability training, etc. And it's all free of charge because the corporates pay for the training. And we also do the largest youth-led climate summit in the world. In COP26, we had over 47,000 young people globally, and that's going to run every year as well. So the story of I really like what Mark was saying, but take something, a resource, and turn it into, don't view it. We teach kids how to harness resources. So this little boy, is this the story you're talking about? He got a pound and he turned it into 100 pennies. Yeah. And he got the local priest to bless the pennies and he sold them for £1 each. But we had 10-year-old kids turning a pound into £14,000 in 4 weeks.
Wow.
Utterly brilliant. And this is the thing that maybe then I'll be quiet, Per. One thing that really inspired me was the government asked to speak to me, and they said, we're spending all this money on entrepreneurship training, and we've never seen passion and results like this. And my response was, because you're showing them how to do it. Well, maybe not showing them very well how to do it, but you're teaching them how. Yeah, but the kids, you need to start with why. What do you care about? And what do you want the world to be like? And they tap into their passion, go, right, let's show you the tools to bring that to life. And I suppose that's what we've been discussing today. Like, why are you doing it? That's when people overcome their nerves. That's when they go the extra mile, because it's not about paying the rent. It's about, and heaven forbid, new alloys in your stupid sports car. It's about, I want my community to be safer. I want the world to be, and then that's when the passion gets released. Yeah, and that's what we did with the kids, and they showed everybody how to do it.
Thank you very much, Mick, and thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, Jennifer, and thank you, Mark. And let's send this message out in the world. I hope some politicians east over will listen a little bit. And thank you very much for everyone else being with us, and stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.